I coach a lot of founders who have ADHD, a lot of neurodivergent founders, and it's such a passion of mine. I love it very much. There's this one founder I was working with. He had this anklet that he would wear. So it was this device where his EA could set alarms for him so that he wouldn't miss meetings, and the anklet would vibrate before he had a meeting, so it would interrupt him and cause him to break his state and then get to his computer so he could be on time for his meetings. So little things like this are fascinating.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for those people watching us from around the world, Prince George is in the province of British Columbia. British Columbia is a big province, and most people likely know Vancouver. I'm about 500 miles north of Vancouver in Prince George, which is physically the center of British Columbia, south, north, east, west. So beautiful, beautiful day here. It's about plus 2 or 3, and it's beautiful weather. And then today we have a very, very special guest as a podcast guest, and her name is Abby Diamond. And Abby is immensely talented, has a lot in common with me, as you will discover as we go through our stories here. And she's an artist and has immense flexibility. Anyway, we'll get Abby to tell you all about it. So, Abby, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, I'm so happy to be with you. I love your show, and so it's really fun being face to face in a conversation finally. So glad to be
Thanks.
here.
Thanks, Abby. And
Yeah.
so you are in, I kind of thought that you were for a period in Mexico, but now you are in Seattle, Washington, beautiful area, actually. Tell us a little bit, and I guess a little bit about where are you from originally? Where were you born? And then how did it take you to where you are today?
Okay, perfect. So I'm from San Francisco originally, but when you asked that question, the first thing I thought of was how reading the 4-hour work week when I was in college and then subsequently rereading it about 40 times is the reason why I ended up in Mexico. Because when
Okay.
I first heard that book by Tim Ferriss and I started getting a sense for kind of creating this life full of life experiments where you could be a digital nomad and you could move and live in different cities and you could just craft a life out of your imagination. That was what really gave me the itch to just live in different countries and travel. And I ended up in this beautiful little city called San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, where I just moved. I just moved from. I was there for the past year, and it's lovely. So you really need to go if you've never been, John. I think you're gonna just adore it.
Yeah, I've been in Mexico City, and then on the coast I've been, and but it's obviously a beautiful country. And
Yes, yeah,
which other
beautiful.
countries have you been in? I was born in Holland, and
Uh-huh.
so have you been in Europe as well, or?
Yeah, I went to art school briefly when I was 19. So I was in Greece and Italy during that time. I spent a good amount of time in India. I've traveled all through Europe, but the longest lengths of time have probably been in those countries. It's Greece, Italy, India, and Mexico.
What an experience, Abby.
Yeah.
And so now the other part about you is that you're an artist, you are a producer, a programmer, you are playing an, any music instrument. You have an amazing voice. So
Oh, thank you
you're
so much.
so tell
Thank
us
you
a bit
so
about
much.
that part of your life.
Absolutely. So I was a full-time artist actually until COVID. And it was interesting that when concert venues closed down, there was a part of me, John, that felt really relieved because I had become so burnt out uh, with my craft. Really, I felt like I had just it didn't feel like it was really about the art anymore.
Right.
And so what I did was I really leaned into the other most intense interest and passion in my life, which is psychology. And so now what I do, along with being an artist and always cultivating art and music in my life, is I do executive coaching. And I work with a company called Athena, which works with founders and C-level executives globally and pairs them with executive assistants overseas. So I do in-house executive coaching with Athena, and I teach founders how to craft life experiments and delegation experiments with virtual executive assistants so that they can really create lives that are not only effective and successful, but also fulfilling. They can really let it sink in these incredible things that they've made in the world. And they can feel the beauty of it in their lives. I think that's really the whole purpose. So that's what I've been doing with my days.
So the way I visualize that a lot of the executives or founders of companies have gone from one phase in their lives to a whole new area that creates all kinds of pressures from all kinds of different directions
Oh
and
yeah,
becomes somewhat overwhelming, and how can they structure that and all of those kind of things, right? Is that what it is?
absolutely. Uh-huh. Absolutely. So it's anything from how to set up streamlined household management systems to how to craft really special rituals with your family. We have this awesome person who works with Athena, and he does really fascinating life experiments. His name's Chris York. So, for example, he has his executive assistant do something with him where when he travels, his EA is helping him adjust his circadian rhythm to the new time zone. So he'll set up lights. It's so interesting. He'll set up lights in the room where he's sleeping, and his EA will be kind of switching around the level of the lights throughout the day to help him acclimate to the new time zone more quickly. So there's all kinds of fun, interesting things that we can
Interesting. Yeah.
craft with outsourcing. Yeah, that was just a random example, but on the topic of ADHD, which we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, there was one client that I was coaching recently. I coach a lot of founders who have ADHD, a lot of neurodivergent founders, and it's such a passion of mine. I love it very much. There was this one founder I was working with who what we helped him set up was he had this anklet that he would wear, and we had his EA. So it was this device where his EA could set alarms for him so that he wouldn't miss meetings, and the anklet would vibrate before he had a meeting, so it would interrupt him and cause him to break his state and then get to his computer so he could be on time for his meetings. So little things like this are fascinating.
Now, the interesting part there, since you raised the issue of ADHD, we talked about it briefly before, and I know we both are in that field, obviously. So I
Yeah.
want to share with you. I'm 83. I was born in November the 1st, 1940, and I was not in Holland, northeastern part of Holland. It was during the start of the First World War, Second World War. It started in April of 1940, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But then, so
Yeah.
that was a difficult time to be grown up, and then I was not
Mhm.
very, it saw far too much that I should not have seen, was affected by
Mhm.
ADHD. Then the other part about it was affected by the inner child issue,
Mhm.
got counseling for that actually well into my 50th year, and was not
Yeah.
very successful academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to
Mm.
do with this guy? Should we send him to the mentally challenged school, or should we get him a profession of some sort? So fortunately, my parents were beautiful people. So they said, okay, my grandfather was a master carpenter and my dad managed a small lumber company. So they said, let's send him to become a furniture maker. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started working in a furniture factory when I was 13, and then became quite good at it actually. And then, but we were liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945, and it had such an impression on me that I always wanted to go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so I tried to go
Wow.
when I was 17, and I kind of had failed, I thought, in my mind in Holland, because all the fellows that I grew up with went to college or went to university, and
Mm-hmm.
I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then they kind of looked down on it. And so I was going to prove to myself, nobody else, that I was just as smart as everybody else. And, and I would build a lumber mill in Canada. So, and then I wanted to start with nothing. So I had one suitcase, three books, two sets of clothes, and I took with me $150 Canadian. And by the time I got off the plane in Montreal and took the train across Canada, and as you well know, it's a long distance, came to Vancouver, went to the immigration office, and then met a German fellow, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't speak English, and fortunately I could speak some German. So I told him what I wanted to do is build a lumber mill. He said, Prince George, British Columbia, 500 miles north. It's a boom town, lots of timber. And so I took my suitcase, three books, two sets of clothes, and took a 14-hour bus ride on Greyhound to Prince George, not far from here. And when I came off the bus, I stood there and looked around, and this is Prince George. That's where I'm going to build my future. And I counted my money three times, and I had $25 and 47 cents. And I counted it at least three times, and that's what it was. My employees made
Wow.
this for me. But what I had plenty of is attitude. I'm always
Yeah.
positive at it. No matter how tough the day is today, I know it's going to be a better day tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And then work
Yeah.
ethic, I work harder than anybody. So,
Wow.
and then started
Mm-hmm.
as a cleaner man, lumber pilot, and then fairly quickly from there on in, I kind of went up the ranks. Started with nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and then, but I still didn't feel good about myself. And already early people said to me, "Oh, you're so successful," and I didn't feel that way. And then it took me more than 37 years before
Mm-hmm.
in 1997, after I was here already for 32 years in Canada, I was already quite successful, that I walked into a bookstore here in town, and I found a book. I don't know why. The book's title was Driven to Distraction. I opened the book. It was written by Dr. Halliwell, and it was about ADHD. And
Mm-hmm.
I said I had never heard of ADHD. Now I was
Yeah.
57 years old, and and I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And so
Mm-hmm.
I bought a book. I wrote in the book in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am because I was ashamed of it, you know. So
Wow.
and the stigma surrounding it then, and then it took me another 5 years before I went to our doctor that delivered our two daughters, and was a personal friend, and he said to me, "Hey John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." So in the meantime, what I had done, looked at Google, got more information about it, and it became. Now the book that was written in 1993 by Dr. Halliwell, who has
Mm-hmm.
written about four or five different books in that category, distraction category, and another
Mm-hmm.
18 of other ones. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first book that kind of showed me what ADHD was all about. Dr. Halliwell, also ADHD. I had him on my podcast actually last week. Very interesting
Oh, that
podcast.
was last week. I was beginning to watch, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the episode, but I saw a bit of your podcast episode with Ned
Yeah,
Hallowell. I love his work. My mom follows him so much. That's amazing.
amazing podcast. So the other
Can't wait.
thing that we talked about is that that I always thought that initially I thought when I did my research that about 8% of the population ADHD, and
Hmm.
I believe that it is much more like 20% of the people, both male and female. And I talked to Dr. Halliwell about it. He said, "No, John, at least 25%." I said, "Okay, I agree with that." Now,
Interesting.
the other thing that we talked about is that I believe that, and this is interesting for you and me to talk about, is that if I look at successful entrepreneurs or CEOs, at
Yeah.
least I said to Mr. Hallowell that I believe that at least 20% of them are ADHD. He said, no, sorry, that at least 50% of them are ADHD. And I mentioned it to him. He said, no, John, at least 75%. And
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
so,
I mean, I get them all the time in my Zoom room,
yeah,
and they're incredible. They're incredible, and they do have. First of all, founders with ADHD are all different, but there are certain superpower patterns that are very noticeable when you're hearing the intimate details of what they deal with, what they struggle with, what their goals are. Um, and so I love this conversation so much. I have a couple questions for you, John,
yeah,
because you came to Canada and you were 25 years old when you got to Canada. Do I have that right?
23,
23. Okay. And you had, what was it? It was 24, it was $24 and 47
25,
cents.
47.
25, or 25, 47. So if you arrived in Canada as a 23-year-old today with that same amount of money, as someone just like you who is has the same work ethic, the same passion, the same attitude, that same amount of money, you with ADHD in Canada, there you are, but it's now. It's 2024. What would you do, let's say, over the first month of landing here? What would you do? What would your approach be to begin to build the empire that you have now?
I would do exactly the same thing. Nothing could stop me. And that would be the same today as it was then. And I don't believe, some people say, well, the opportunities are there now and all of this. I don't believe that. The opportunities are still there. It is the mindset, the determination of success. I knew what I was going to do. I knew when I was 5 years old and we were liberated by the Canadians, they made such an impression on me that I knew
Wow.
at 5 that I would go as soon as I could to the land of my heroes. I wanted to go when I was
Wow.
17. My parents wouldn't let me then. I was then drafted in the Air Force for about 30 months and then still worked on a career in the lumber industry in Holland. And then when I was 23, finally I could go. And so, but I was going to build a lumber mill. There was no question in my mind about that. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
period here that I had nothing to eat or where I had no more money, where I stood in front of the Salvation Army and asked for food, but I felt too ashamed, unfortunately, because that's exactly what they are for. But no, I was
Mm-hmm.
determined. I was going to build a mill, and I was not going to go back to Holland either in a box or successful. A little bit radical,
Wow,
but that's how I felt about it. Yeah,
that's so inspiring. So at first, the very first thing you did you just start looking for a job right away? You said
correct.
you began cleaning. Okay. So if it were the same today, you'd start with still the same level job. You just go kind of door to door and just get something, get some job. Mm-hmm. And then
What
you'd
I
be kind of
did,
crafting.
Abby, I knew my qualities. I knew about the lumber industry. There's lots of lumber industry here. So I knew what I kind of was looking for. the problem that I also had, I didn't speak the language. Knew yes, no, but that was about the size of it. And then,
Wow.
and then fortunately, I went to the immigration office here in Prince George, and then it was on a Thursday afternoon, and it was fortunately in the summer, in July '65, there was a fellow with a Dutch heritage working there during the holidays, and so he could kind of guide me. And since I had a cash flow problem, he said, "When do you want to start working?" I said, "Well, tonight." And if we couldn't find a job here, so they found one for me about 75 miles south in a city called Quesnel. So I thought I'll just
Mm.
take the bus and then that's where I go. I had visualized this. Typical European. I had gray pants, white shirt, tie, the vest, and then a black jacket, double-breasted jacket, and a raincoat, black shoes, and then my suitcase. And so there was no bus. They said, no, the bus only goes in the morning or in the evening. So I walked to the highway and I hitchhiked.
Oh my
And
God.
a lot
Without
of
any
people,
English.
and then finally somebody stopped and they must have thought, this guy is strange, and so, but he gave me a ride and then said, where do you want to go? And I kind of knew it. I said, Greyhound Station, that's all I knew. And we had talked to the
Wow.
HR manager of a mill, a little lumber mill in Quesnel, and so I
Hmm.
called him. He came down to get me, and then he brought me
Hmm.
to the mill that evening and found me a place for board and room. I dropped off my stuff. I went to the mill in my my gray pants, my white shirt, my tie, my vest, and my double-breasted jacket, and I started piling lumber in. And the mill employed about 250 people. It was a plywood plant and a lumber mill. And I bet you all 200 people came to the chain to see this crazy guy piling lumber in his suit, So, but that's
Wow.
what I did the first
Mm.
night. And
And
second night, I bought some stuff.
how how did you really build your mindset over that time? Did you have um, certain books that you would read, or did you have, I mean, you were by yourself in Canada, right? So, what were you thinking in your head, and how did you build yourself up when times would get tough?
So, something that could explain part of that is a very good question, actually. The three books that I had with me was
Mm,
Management by Drucker in
mhm,
Dutch. And I liked that book, and you're familiar with the book likely. And then I had another book is Logical Thinking, also in
mm,
Dutch. And then I had
logical
another
thinking.
book about Canada. And so,
Mm,
and I had always been interested in management, and wherever I heard people even in Holland, making presentations about business, I would go out of
mhm,
my way to listen to them and try to figure out what made them click, what made
mm.
them different from everybody else.
What were some of the basic patterns that you would notice that made it click for some leaders, where you kind of clocked it and you said, "Okay, I'm going to emulate these principles, these qualities to become a good leader."
Understanding how business works, determination, persistent, and then as I became, those be the foundations pieces. Attitude,
Mhm.
passion, work ethic is the very foundation. I will
Yeah.
never give up. I'm always, I even now is that at 83, people say to me, when are you going to retire? Well, whenever I get old, so, I'm not going to retire. So I wake up at 5:30 and I always think I'm late. And then I always make my bed, and then every day to me is a good day, So no matter how many challenges, we'll just deal with the issues as they come, and tomorrow is going to be even a better day, And that's how I work. And then people say to me, we have 10 different companies or so, and then I do writing, I do podcasting, I do presentations, the in different locations about entrepreneurship or whatever it is, and they say, well, how do you do all this stuff? I say
Mhm.
ADHD.
Yeah.
It's all because
Interesting.
of ADHD.
Hmm.
But for me, it's
Wait,
deep.
hold on. I have more about that. So because of ADHD, you have the endless intrigue, excitement, curiosity, enthusiasm. When you see something that inspires you, you just want to go straight there and you can't you in a way you're just unstoppable towards anything that intrigues you.
The other part that is interesting, Abby, is that I think you became aware of ADHD in your early 20s or maybe late teens. I don't know
Late
exactly. Yeah. So for me,
20s.
I became aware of ADHD and had no idea when it was when I was 57. And up
Yeah,
to
it's
that point, I had most of the times I failed in Holland, more or
yeah.
less. And I never quite reconciled that with myself. And so, but I had developed other things that I had the foundational pieces of being determined, being a visionary already in all the things that I did, but made me already successful in Holland. When
Hmm.
initially studying at 13, but I picked up things fairly quickly in terms of managing. And then I always looked at
Hmm.
and sought out people that were very good at what they were doing and acquired their skill sets. And already in Holland, I was successful, even although in Holland, most of the times, and I left because I loved Canada and the opportunity, and they liberated us. That's one reason. But the other reason was that I wanted to start from the beginning, because in Holland what they tend to do is that at some point you likely get married, you want to have a good career, you buy a house, and then so if you try to get the career and then you apply for the job and you say, okay, where are your diplomas? Well, I have no diplomas. So and so that becomes then an issue, and mentally for me it was an issue. And for me, starting anew, I know I was just as good as everybody else. And so to start anew again in Canada with objectives of becoming a lumber manufacturer, to me was something that was the goal that I was going to follow. And then
Got
start
it.
with nothing.
Right. So one thing that I'm hearing is just the clarity of the goal was it created this tunnel vision around there's no other way. You're gonna go straight towards it. There's just this endless drive that you had that I'm sure was very related to your ADHD, but also mostly just seems to be a part of who you are. That even
Correct.
if you didn't have ADHD, I think it would have been the same.
Correct.
It would have been the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
The one part, maybe, Abby, and I've given this a lot of thought as well as you do, is that what I have found is that I tend to make CEOs or senior management people. My companies, I'm sole owner of all my companies. So, but I've worked in other settings where I make people feel uncomfortable, and
Ooh.
the reason that I do is I think outside of the box. I always think as, can we do this better or can we do it different? For a lot of people, they become uncomfortable if you go there, and
Mm-hmm.
so so that has been one of the benefits. The other one is that I believe my strength is that I'm a visionary. I look forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and so and not many people do that. And then in combination with all of that, I have been able to utilize the good parts about ADHD, and I'm careful with the impulsivity and some of the other things that are attached. I have learned to manage that for me, although I'm still fairly aggressive in terms of from a business perspective compared to a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
people is making decisions. I
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't overbelabor. I don't overmanage, and uh, don't go from, in some companies you go from meeting to meeting to many. I mean, I'm not doing that much.
Ah, got it. Hmm. Wow, I love hearing this so much. And I'm curious because I feel like because you're such a visionary in the sense that you're always looking ahead 10, 20 years, etc. This probably counterbalanced the ADHD in such a beautiful way where a lot of people who have ADHD, they do struggle with impulsivity and just making the decision right now, not looking so far into the future about what might be the consequences of this decision if I make it right now. But because you were able to have the scope of the horizon as a part of your decision making, it allowed you to both have the intensity that goes along with this type of mind frame, but then also have the long-term vision and so make more sound decisions. I think
Right.
that's really good. Yeah,
Right.
cool. I really wonder when it comes to because you're so healthy. My God. I can't believe that you're in your 80s. You do not look like you're in your 80s at all. When you said that I was really shocked. And so I have to know what are some just tips that you have for being so healthy, staying so healthy? And I'm sure this is something that you've been just over years and years and years and years. Do you do the exact same things every day, every week, etc.? Do you change it around? What's your template for how to be so healthy in your 80s?
So, so on my late age, when I became knowledgeable about ADHD and some of the other things, I'm a late bloomer
Yeah.
in a way. So I started to write books, got involved in public speaking, much more. And then, so I have 3 books that I'm going to share with you. And I probably will sign them and send them to you as well. But I'm working on another
Awesome.
book that you will find interesting. It's this one. Can you see it?
Yes, I can't wait. Oh my God. Living young, dying old. This is the
A-
best picture on the cover.
And so that will come out in
Okay.
August. And so that's precisely dealing with the issues. Probably in 2008, everybody gets kind of a shock in their life that makes them look at themselves and say, what am I doing here? And so I
Mm.
nearly died. I got a case of diverticulitis that ruptured, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's in your middle of your body, and it breaks something, and it's toxic. So fortunately,
Mm.
I survived that barely, and then from there, and then I started looking at it, and I have to take things more serious. But we used to do always, and I was not necessarily unhealthy, but I was not quite as good as I should be, and
Mhm.
so. What we usually do at the end of the year, we make the commitment we're going to do this, that, and it always includes the gym. I'm going to go get a membership to the gym, and then I'm going to go to, and within 2 weeks, we find 100 reasons why we're too busy. We can't go to the gym anymore until the next year. So, but
Yeah.
I knew what I had to do because I'm fairly preoccupied. I have to get a trainer, and that has to be a commitment to go to the gym. So I
Wow.
started doing that in 2009 after I recovered from surgery and all of those kind of things. And I started to look more closely at my diet and then also going to the gym. So I did that for about 6, 7 years. And then somebody said, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? And then I thought, it's a challenge. Yeah, maybe I should do that. And so I started working on it, and subsequently I then started competing, and was quite successful in it first in northern BC. But I already
Hmm.
was in my mid 70s, and came in
Wow.
bodybuilding physique second, in bodybuilding third in physique here in northern BC. Qualified me for the provincials, came in third in physique second bodybuilding, qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. and so
Wow.
and then
Amazing.
COVID came, and then so now I'm again training as we speak for competing again, and I already contacted Arnold. I will be back in 25, when I'm 85, and that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So that kind of then gave me the commitment to go to the gym. The other part is that I probably was not as aware of diets and physically and getting so I eat mainly plant-based food, and then I'm very
Me too.
very careful. Yeah, I'm very
Hmm.
careful about diet. My wife is vegan. I call it 80/20, and
Okay,
so
cool.
and and I got used to that, and that is part of it. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't do
Uh-huh.
any of that kind of stuff.
Yep, me too. Wow. So, okay, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you're about 80/20 vegan, so mostly plant-based. And
Correct.
then what do you still go to a personal trainer, or how many days a week
Yes.
do you do it? What's the
I, I
protocol?
go right now as just to maintain what I do, I go 3 days a week. And then, but
3
on
days
the
a week?
weekend, I'm fairly active myself. My wife is as well. We have a place, just to put this in perspective. I'm in northern BC. The weekends, otherwise be at work here 7 days a week. I usually remove myself from Prince George. I go to Victoria, very close to where you are, actually. Victoria, BC, on the island. You
Yeah,
familiar? Yeah.
I want
So
to
we
go.
have.
I have never been. I've wanted to go for a while.
It's
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
gorgeous.
We have a place that we call in North Saanich, just outside. It's on
Mm,
the island, and it's just outside of Victoria. Beautiful house there, training area. We have an arena. We have 7 horses. My wife
wow.
is there. Mandy. We ride English dressage, and so beautiful area. So when I'm there, I'm still active. And then as I
Mhm.
get closer to competition, then obviously my diet becomes tighter, and then I usually do 5 days a week of
Wow.
training and getting ready for competition.
Wow. Okay, got that. So I'm really clocking this because my stepfather, he is 71 and he goes to a personal trainer 3 days a week as well. And he's
Right.
just in the most amazing shape. And
Yeah.
we're right in front of the water. The water's cold. And he goes swimming now in the cold water in the Puget Sound every other day
Good
for
for him.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's very systematic the way that he does this. He keeps it
Yeah.
really simple. He doesn't change it around. It's
No.
just 3 days a week with the same personal trainer. And now he added in every other day in the cold water. And I find this to be so fascinating to see examples like him and you, where this is what people want. They want to be, it is a dream to be so healthy in your 80s the way that you are, and just
Yeah.
so vibrant and alive and happy and fulfilled. So this
I want
is
to be
really good to hear.
120.
Got it. I got it. That's perfect. Does your
So
wife do the same protocol as you? Does she work out 3 days a week with the personal
yeah,
trainer?
she does. She has a trainer, and probably not quite as intensive as I do, but she is 74, but she's in good shape, and
Wow.
physically, and very, very, very uh, aware of diet and all of the things surrounding that. Very
Hmm.
involved in the medical thing, and so with living young, dying old, the focus is not so much on becoming an Olympian or a bodybuilder, but I do. Simply, what I'm suggesting is that what we should do is at least try to be active 20, 30 minutes a day, even if it is just
Hmm.
walking for the
Hmm.
average individual. It will keep you in shape. And then be
Wow.
aware of diet and be proactive, because it's all about, as you all know, it's all about quality of life. It's not so much the age, but quality of life. And that means being
Wow.
proactive.
Hmm. And how long have the two of you been together, by the way, you and your wife? How long have you
40
been?
years.
40 years. What
40
are some
years,
of
yeah.
your, that's beautiful. What are some of your tips for having a healthy relationship that is so beautiful after 40 years? What are your key tips?
It starts with respect, and being friends first and foremost, and then all the other things come automatic, and being friends and respect and knowing that being open minded, even during our relationship has had its challenges, as most do, and part of that was, I mentioned that earlier, in early parts of our relationship, we got counseling, and I always remember that that we were struggling, and then the counselor suggested that he should have a direct meeting with me about things that he was concerned about as they
Mm,
related to my past. And so we agreed
mm,
with that. And that was dealing with the inner child, that I
yeah.
had really never resolved that. I had no idea about the inner child, but it was that little boy that was caught during the war years. In Holland, my mom and dad were married in 1938, and then very quickly had two children. My sister, there was 1 year older than me, a brother 2 years older than me, and then I came around November 1940 as the third. And then my dad was drafted in the Dutch Army April the 1st, 1940. And the last time they heard from him, when in the bombing of Rotterdam, and where thousands of people died, and he was right in that area. So they wouldn't know for
Mm,
more than 5 years if he was dead or alive. During that
wow.
period, so my mom, with three little kids around her, and lots of people were very supportive, but they all had their own issues, their own problems. So everybody was pretty much on their own. And I still
Mm,
remember that, from the time that I was 3.5, 4, that when the Allied forces bombed Germany to force them into capitulation, we had hundreds of planes flying over our part of Holland, and you would
mhm.
see as many as 300 planes in the air. And the sound of that
Wow.
is unbelievable. And in the distance,
Wow.
we could see the sky being red because we were only 10, 15 minutes away from the German borders. And I still
Mm,
remember that in the sound. And then when we were 4.5, 5 years old, and the Germans then had cut off all the food supply into Holland, and we as kids would, every morning we would take gunny sacks and go into the railroad yards and pick up anything edible and burnable.
mm,
And I still even now remember the cold, and it was the hunger period then, and then also it was the coldest winter on record, and was extremely cold, and we had that little stove kept us warm. And then the other part that affected me, and likely hence the inner child, is that the fear of sensing the anxiety of the only parent that we had, my mom, obviously, and losing her, and that kind of stayed there, and it was not until I was then already well into my 50s when I got counseling for that. Very emotional, actually.
wow.
Yeah,
So emotional. And so you
yeah.
said she passed away. She crossed over when you were just a kid, or when did your mother end
She
up?
died when she was 83, actually. So
Oh,
I
oh,
was here already. My dad came back after the Second World War, but that's another thing, and is that not over belaboring it necessarily, but if we look around and we see all the challenges around the world right now, in the Ukraine, we see it in the Middle East, we see Iran and all those kind of places, and then a lot of people don't realize that, that if we have wars, that, and some people think, well, when the war is over, everything goes back to normal. No, that's not the way it is. It may take a generation, sometimes 2 generations, before a sense of normality even would come back again.
Mhm.
And I've seen that even in the relationship between my parents and the effect of it. PTSD for my dad. I always remember he still had a helmet where the bullet went right through it, barely missed his head, and when he came back and never kind of got over the war so in a real sense, so, and that's
Wow.
why a lot of times now when I fly around a lot and both in the United States as well as we do a lot of business in the United States and Canada, every time I sit in an airplane, I look outside and say it's paradise. We live absolutely in paradise. And then I see these other things going on, and that is both in Canada and the United States, North America. And then I sometimes listen to all the things that will go on politically and say, these people, they talk about some of the politics, both here or in Canada and the United States, in terms of dictatorships. Have you
Mhm.
got any idea what dictatorships are like that would change everything? Like look at if those people that think this is so great to get dictatorships or have no idea of what it looks like, go to Russia for a while. Go to North Korea. Go to Iran. Go to Venezuela. Go to Cuba. Those are the dictatorship. Even Hungary is moving in that direction and saying, that's not what you want. You want a democratic, with all the flaws that it has, both here and in the United States. But the last thing that you want is a dictatorship, so that kind of thing, So
Yeah. I like how you said in the end, you choose it with all of its flaws, right? You choose the whole
exactly,
thing with all of its flaws. I think you can apply that to so many things.
yeah.
And so wow, what a moving story. It's amazing. And I wonder, you began this process when you were in counseling of discovering that you have this inner child and getting into contact with this inner child inside of you. Have you continued that communion with your inner child, and do you have certain self-care practices or ways in
No,
which you nurture
yeah,
your
it
inner
was
child now?
yeah, it was quite interesting, Abby. Like once that was still there and it was active and it affected me, as it does with
Yeah.
most people, I believe. Once it was reconciled, then that part disappeared. So
Yeah.
disappeared in the sense of the little boy now was at peace, so,
Yeah.
and yeah, very emotional. So
Yeah.
now it's a memory, in terms of the challenges that we had during that period, and
Mhm.
and all the other things. But I look at now more in terms of memory. On November the 11th, when we remember the warriors and those that fell and all of those things. I usually give presentations to schools in the region in BC, at least 4 schools
Mhm.
usually, and depending on every time, and to talk about what it was like and why the 2 minutes of silence. What does it really mean? And why
Right.
is it so important that we remember, the freedom that we have and how quickly, in appreciating what we have, how quickly it all can change. And all
Right.
of a sudden, the whole world changes around you, just like that, and how
Wow.
important
Do
it
you
is.
have
And
any yeah. I was just wondering, do you have any friends who were there with you in your childhood who you're now still in contact with? And have you noticed how they've dealt with just their evolution over the years? Are any of them kind of similar to you in any ways or very different from you? I'm so curious.
Yeah, I left Holland 60 years ago. And so I still have contact there, but not with so many of my friends again. I'm now kind of getting to the area, but a lot of them are no longer there. And,
Mhm.
and then, but every so often when I go down there and have an opportunity to talk about it, I can still talk about people that have the same ideas. And obviously, the whole communication side of things, that where there used to be discussions between groups, are have changed. Where podcasting now has become like you and me are sitting here having a conversation about these issues and we sharing it together. But the beauty of podcasting is that we have tens of thousands of people listening to our conversation. It's amazing. So, where at one point we would, have discussions about all kinds of different things, including the one that we talked about, but that less so all the time now. But still, the opportunity is there to interact and still,
Yeah.
talk about it and exchange thoughts about it. And from time to time, I meet people on my podcasting that have experience in war years, not necessarily
Mhm.
where I was in the area, but in a general sense.
Yeah. What what would be some advice that you would share with someone who experienced a war and they're now just coming into contact with the inner child and learning how to face the trauma of it? What would be some guidance or some advice that you'd give them as they open up that very emotional process?
For a lot of people that have been directly, indirectly involved in war or similar situations like that, or revolution areas where you're getting confronted by the bad parts about it, seek counseling early.
Mhm.
Because what I would see even with my parents is that affected their whole life. My dad became a closet alcoholic, and
Mm.
because of it, didn't express emotions well. Our generation, the one before us, didn't didn't do that very well, especially not if the ones were affected by those kind of things. And saying, did he ever talk about the warriors? He never really did. But was
Wow.
it still there? Well, how could it not be? I know it for me. And then to seek counseling is very, very important in terms of
Mm.
and for a lot of adults or even young people that are struggling with issues, seeking counseling, is I believe very, very important.
Hmm. I completely agree with you. I think that counseling is so invaluable. And so, in your opinion, talking about it, sharing, this is one of the best ways to process and heal.
Absolutely, yeah,
Hmm.
no question.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. Such an intimate take on what's going on in the world now, and just juxtaposing it with what you went through in Holland. It's special to hear all of that and the lessons that you've learned because they're so applicable today.
Yeah, the other part, Abby, I believe is very important, is giving back to the community, being active and
Mhm.
proactive in your community, and so I try to do that here. Always have done that in a way, and wherever the opportunity is available, become involved, interact with young people in particular. You're a very good communicator, and that's already obvious. I was very lucky. I was not very good communicator for a long time, and I was very good indirectly feeling insecure, feeling that I had failed somewhat, and then obviously
Mhm.
English being my second language, and if actually my third language, because I grew up speaking dialect in Holland. that is the northeastern part, you speak a dialect. So by the time, and I love speaking dialect, by the time I acquired to speak High Dutch, I moved to Canada to learn to speak English, So, but the
Hmm.
other part was that I did not feel confident in terms of interacting in a broader sense, other than with a small group of people in my operations. And then, by pure coincidence, I had an ex-sister-in-law of mine actually, brought me to Toastmasters.
Really? Toastmasters. Okay, I've always been so curious about Toastmasters. I've never done it, but can you tell me a little bit about it? Did you think it was a really positive experience?
So with me, so she said you should come with me because I had real issues with, the and so I said, okay, what are you going to do there? He said, well, you just sit there and you listen, and then they. I said, are they going to ask me any questions? He said, no, 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 they're not going to ask you. So we barely halfway through the meeting, and then somebody stood up and said, hey, John, tell us about you. I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. So, but I stayed for about 10 years, and I
Really?
became a distinguished Toastmaster, a DTM, and that's the highest level in Toastmasters. There are probably 450,000 individuals in North America and the rest of the world that are actively now involved in Toastmasters. Prince George probably has 3 clubs. I'm sure Seattle has 10 or 12 clubs, if not 20. And they are usually of 20 members, 30 members maybe. And around the world, probably 10 million people have been benefiting from different levels of Toastmasters. Not everybody stays as long as I did. For me,
Yeah.
it was important. And probably of all of those, probably less than 1% go to the level of distinguished Toastmasters, DTMs. So it was important for me. And I know I'm a good communicator, so are you. And but I was a basket case. I've seen the absolute worst of individuals having, as they say, that doing a public presentation, people fear it more than death, and so it's a common expression. And I've seen in different clubs the worst of them, but none. The absolute worst one that I've ever have encountered of all of them was me.
Oh
And
my God.
it's really true. I could have crawled out of there. So that's how much I feared. Now it has changed my life between ADHD, Toastmasters, and public speaking. So what is Toastmasters all about? It is a group of people where they get together, and it's not about public speaking only. That's only one portion. It becomes, how do you become a good listener, for one,
Mm,
and how do you
mm,
develop thinking on your feet with different
mm.
issues. They say, hey, Abby, this is the issue, speak about it for 2 minutes. And so
Yeah.
and it develops the skill sets that you need to become better communicators. So I'm always believe very much in Toastmasters as something that I encourage people to pursue.
I'm
So
very curious to try it. I think I may have to just check it out. I've been thinking about, I've just been, I guess it's very mysterious because everybody talks about it and I don't really know what goes on inside of those meetings. But I feel like everybody who I've ever met that's done Toastmasters, they're incredible people and they're so self-expressed and they have a sense of connection with who they are and they're just able to really share who they are with such freedom. So,
yeah, and it creates confidence, right? And then
mm,
thinking on your feet, very important. Think of like podcasting. You couldn't do it unless you were had clarity of mind and thinking on your feet, because this is good practice, right? So of interacting.
mhm.
So I certainly would suggest that it doesn't cost you nothing. Go down and sit and listen to a meeting, and but you all already have confidence and you've been successful. But for the clients that you interact with, what I found a lot of times, and I've interacted with lots of CEOs and people on that level, a lot of them require likely Toastmasters, because a lot, and
Mm.
that's the same with business meetings. It's all part of Toastmasters. How do you conduct business meetings? And what I found going to the highest levels, that a lot of the senior people are not good communicators and do not fully understand business meetings, and all of that can be learned at Toastmasters. And it's one of the areas that is missing. Communication skills is missing in our schooling system.
I completely agree. I completely agree with that. It would be incredible to see elements of Toastmasters in elementary schools. How game changing would that be?
And at
That
the
would
same
be
time, that for me, and the other come from Holland, was struggling with myself in terms of self-confidence, because, my education, grade 3, grade 7, and so on, and then having to acquire the skill sets of the language, and then, and then getting into Toastmaster, understanding ADHD, and then
Mhm.
all of that combined gave me the confidence, and so I can do keynotes now, and I know I'm a very, very effective speaker on my feet, and and I love to do it, and so, and again, I give it all that I got with passion, and and I love it.
Wow, that's so
So now we
cool.
need to talk a little bit more about you, because otherwise it's all about me, and I want to talk a little bit more about you.
I'm loving the conversation about you. It's been great to hear your stories.
So, are you still doing more on the singing part and the composing, and is that
Yeah.
something that you always have liked to? You did that already from a young age, right?
Yes, and it is one of the most important parts of my life and always will be. And it's actually so beautiful that we're having this conversation about the inner child right now, because I just finished. There's this book. I have it on my table somewhere around me. Oh, I see it over here. I'm going to grab it so I can show you.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is a book that I think you would absolutely love. Can you see it? It's The
yeah, yeah,
Artist's Way by
yeah.
Julia Cameron.
Okay.
And it is so amazing. So it outlines a 12-week process for unblocking your creativity. And this book has been around for such a long time. It's a very classic book. Um, and many prolific artists have cited this book as the reason for creating masterpieces. So I recently did this 12-week process with my partner and my a very close friend and his wife. And what we would do is we would meet on Zoom every week for an hour, and we would go through the exercises, because it's each chapter of this book is 12 weeks. So chapter 1 is week 1, chapter 2 is week 2, etc. So this is an example of a life experiment that I did very recently, just around creativity. And it's really about connecting with your inner child and really creating a relationship with your inner child where you are living a life that is creative and living a life that is playful and fun and beautiful and fulfilling. So no matter what, music and art will always be one of the very most important things to me. No matter how no matter where I am, what I'm doing, it's the foundation, it's the backbone for me and who I am. It has to be a part of my life. What about you? Do you make art? Have you ever dabbled in anything like this? Have you ever played an instrument or made music?
I always wanted to play guitar, and I probably have 5, 6 of them. I cannot play guitar,
Oh,
and and
really?
and I tried it in Holland, and they made it too complicated. And then my ADHD thing is the guy that was teaching me, he said, "Why don't you go home and put away your guitar, because you'll never learn." So,
Oh my gosh, that's
but I love to listen to music, and I'm very much into that. The but yeah.
mhm. Hmm.
So, but no,
I highly recommend this book. I think you love it because it creates a new way of looking at the inner child where it's not just about grief and trauma, right? It's
right,
also think about the really lovely parts of being a child and having
correct,
those parts still at play in how you look at the world now. So
right.
really igniting that sense of innocence, that sense of wonder in how you navigate reality, where everything is new, everything is full of intrigue, everything is possible. And
I, I,
this book is a cool way to be in that. Mhm.
I love it, because it looks at the inner child from a different perspective than the one that I raised. Is that the anxiety about losing a parent and directly relating to war, and but I still believe that that other person in a different setting is still there, and that. So I'm going to check it out, and probably it's available
Yeah.
on Amazon. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're going to love it. Beautiful.
So, Abby, we have been interacting for an hour. We need to do this again because we never
I would love to.
really, yeah. So, uh, I really appreciate podcasting with you. The other thing that we do, our podcast will be available tomorrow morning. Yeah. So we don't edit much on our podcasting, other than if there's a hiccup of some sort. There usually isn't. The only time that we had something that we thought we should edit is that we had I just introduced my guest, and then the whole building started shaking. We had a 4.6 uh, earthquake, and we even left that part in. So, but
Wow.
so we put it out very very quickly the following day, so you can share it with your guest. And then the other things I should quickly show you is I have one book. I'm going to send you a copy of it, Against All Odds. Then the second one that I wrote, you like this one, is ADHD Unlocked.
I
And
can't wait to read that one. I've been wanting to read that one, so
and then the
perfect.
other one is this one, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And so I'm going to sign those and then send them to you.
Yay! That's so sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really look forward to that. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm so inspired by the way that you have created a life that is both full of um, this fiery passion and goals and outcomes that you're just steadfast to achieve. So it's very achievement driven. There's your life is full of results and achievement. It's very inspiring, but there's a sense of consistency and just total reliability and an ability to stay balanced and keep things simple that I think have really um, shaped the life that you have. You are staying on course with your goals, and as someone who has ADHD, that's is really interesting how you've been able to do that and just always. Um, I mean, look at you. You're in your early 80s. You look so healthy. I mean, you're just full of life. You're so
Yes,
vibrant, and
yes.
it's a testament to the decisions that you've just been making every day forever.
I appreciate that, Abby. And let's make sure we stay in touch. And
Absolutely.
I'm gonna make sure that Scott has your address, and then we'll
Perfect.
send you the books, and then we'll stay in touch. About 6 months from now, we'll again make contact and see if we can do another podcast together.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. And then
I
for
appreciate.
everyone who, yeah, absolutely. So I'll just share that the best way to get in touch with me is Instagram. My handle is Abby Diamond X. So ABBYDIAMOND and then an X at the end. And if you want to build a life experiment or if you need some executive coaching, feel free to just reach out to me and we will set up a session and see how we can create something in your life that's really going to make an impact.
Abby, it was an absolute pleasure, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks again,
Perfect.
Abby.
It was
Take care.
wonderful meeting you. Take good care. Bye.
Bye bye.